EAGLES, Eagles.
Welcome in, Eagles fans. Welcome in, Birds 365 fans. It's unofficially a football Friday. We had football this week. I'm calling this a real deal football Friday, coming off the Eagles week 1 of OTAs. Johnny Mac, how you doing this Friday morning?
Doing well. Yeah. Getting excited by Kenny Pickett. You told me before the show. Yeah. Boy,
Yeah,
people run with stuff.
Story,
Yeah. They really run with
apparently
things.
It's looking good. Well, John, you were down at OTAs. How did
he was very sharp. He played very well. I mentioned, significant upgrade. I think he's going to be a significant upgrade as a backup to from Marcus Mariota last year. I think, if you need to win a game or two this year, I think you're going to be in a better position to do it. And that's what you want out of a backup quarterback, but you don't want the backup quarterback to play. And I think, my buddy Ed Krause wrote about it. Evidently, his quarterback coach picked it up and a bunch of other people picked it up. He was sharp. He was sharper than Jalen Hurts. But again, I don't get the whole philosophy that the quarterback is basically on the field by himself. And everybody boils it down to quarterback and quarter. He's playing with the second team. Jalen Hurts is playing with the first team and against the first team defense. And he doesn't have first team receivers because Devontae Smith's not there. AJ's the only one there. And AJ is having limited reps on top of that. And you got the Joseph Nadas of the world. And, Paris Campbell looked pretty good as well, maybe because of who he was measured up against. As far as the Eagles backup receivers at the current time, and we'll talk about John Ross in a little bit.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's exhausting. Insert name of quarterback. It could be, Justin Herbert. Oh, you can't win. There's 52 other guys and more than that on the practice squad was 16. It's astonishing to me that people can't get over that hump. So many of them. And it's just about quarterback versus quarterback. And in this instance, it's about a second stringer against a first stringer and all these different moving parts and guys who are in and out of OTAs. He looks sharp. Well done, Kenny Pickett. And he looks sharper than Jalen Hurts. That doesn't mean he's better than Jalen Hurts, people. God.
It's so true, though, John, the tale of this quarterback can't win. And I even had this debate on the National Football Show because I've been joining Dan a couple times.
Such a dumb
debate. He's talking to me about, Jared Goff. And I'm like, listen, if the team around them is great, then sure, they can win a Super Bowl with the exception of Patrick Mahomes and Tom Brady, who always seem to make it work. And they're the exceptions, not the rule. It's so overblown. And by the way, I have a different take than all the Eagles fans. I love to hear that Kenny Pickett looks good. That's great news. If something bad happens to Jalen Hurts, God forbid, obviously we don't want that to happen. But if something bad does happen, maybe we have a guy who can go in there and win some ball games. By the way, our only Super Bowl did come with a backup quarterback, so it's great to have him here. I'm not saying he's going to, surpass Jalen Hurts. I'll go out on a limb right now and say if Jalen Hurts doesn't get hurt, Kenny Pickett will not.
He will not. He will
Breaking
never
news.
see the field.
Breaking news.
Yeah. But yeah, and people have won Super. Eli Manning beat Tom Brady. All right, did he magically become better than Tom Brady? If you go back to the Trent Dilfers and of the world who won Super Bowls, and you've seen it, and people fail to acknowledge what having a great quarterback does. Is it? I say it all the time. It increases your margin of error. Everything's got to be perfect to win a Super Bowl with Trent Dilfer around him. Everything's got, well, you can do it. We've seen it. The Eagles, I'm sorry, Nick Foles truthers. They won a Super Bowl on a game with Nick Foles, and they made a run with Nick Foles. Nick Foles ain't better than Donovan McNabb.
No, he's not.
Sorry.
Nick Foles isn't even better than Carson Wentz or Jalen Hurts
No.
or any other
We can
quarterback.
go. I don't want to open that door because those people are weirdos. The Nick Foles truth.
Oh, I love Nick Foles. I mean, he brought us what we want. But come on, I mean, you got to call it for what it is.
Yeah,
and it's so true. I mean, it's such a good point too. Just ask Matt Stafford. The guy played in Detroit for how many years? Couldn't win squat.
Then he
went to LA,
magically got good.
Yeah,
Aging.
right.
Yeah, Jeff Hostetler won a Super Bowl when Phil Simms went down. Yeah, come on. You gotta be able to have some contextual awareness of it's not just quarterback versus quarterback. If it were, this show wouldn't exist. We wouldn't have to play the season. All right, Kansas City, you win again.
Yeah, right.
Until the decline starts for Patrick Mahomes. Are they going to win? They might win again. And they have a greater margin of error. But I guarantee when Patrick Mahomes' career is done, whenever it's done, he's going to lose his final game more than he wins his final game. Doesn't mean he's a bad quarterback.
That's how it goes for every quarterback that's ever played the game. So you're right about that. I'm going to welcome everybody in this morning. A nice start to our Football Friday show with some Kenny Pickett news. Hey, I'll take it. I'm happy Kenny Pickett's playing well. It's good. I want to have a good backup quarterback, like I said. So I will take it, and I will not overreact to it. I want to welcome everybody in. Twiz and Dank, Screwface, SMD Eagles. We appreciate all you guys. Devontae, Nick, William, Callie, anybody I missed. Sorry I missed you, but we are happy to have you here this morning in the chat. Make sure you guys drop us a like if you're enjoying the show. We appreciate you being here. Johnny Mac, Eagles make it sign yesterday. We talked about Devontae Parker gone all week. Well, they go out and they sign John Ross, former first-round pick. I think he was 9th overall pick in the 2017 draft.
That's all the Eagles do. They sign
former,
and they're not former.
Pick, yeah.
That's my pet peeve. He's always first round
I know that. You schooled me on that the other day. I should know that.
2017 first round, number 9 overall. That was the and he ran a 4.22, and that held up till this year when Xavier Worthy beat it. But obviously history says, and that was to Christian McCaffrey. Christian McCaffrey went 8th. He went 9th. Patrick Mahomes went 10th.
Wow.
So that's the sort of, and if you think about the 3 players after Patrick Mahomes, Marshawn Lattimore has been one of the best cover corners in the NFL when healthy. Deshaun Watson, we know his history, but was certainly looking like a superstar before all the off the field trouble.
12, is that where he went? 12th?
Yeah, he was 12th. Hassan Reddick was 13th, and Derek Barnett was 14th to the Eagles. So
wow,
not great for the Eagles either. But yeah, that was a disastrous pick for Cincinnati. I mean, his career numbers, 62 receptions for 957 yards. His biggest year was 28 receptions. He had a 7 touchdown year. He can run. He had 18 yards per catch, 20 yards per catch. Hasn't played since 2021. He was here for a rookie tryout. So as soon as Parker retired, that's the first name I brought up because the Eagles just got to look at him.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that they didn't sign him right away, and then Parker retires, and then they kind
of if it were that great, they would have signed him right away,
right?
But after Parker retired, so I don't think it's going to be all that relevant long term.
600 yards in his career, John? Is that it?
957, 62 receptions for 957, almost.
Devontae Parker had almost 6,000 total yards at least. I mean, 900 yards is not a lot for a guy drafted in 2020. By the way, in the first round, so he definitely had his share of chances.
Top 10. He was a complete bust. He's still young. He's still not even 30. So, he can stretch the field, certainly.
Does he serve the role, though, that we need? Like we talked about, I know we need a wide receiver 3, but we don't have anybody to back up an outside wide receiver.
I don't think he's relevant as far as wide receiver 3.
he's
And
more of a
that's
backup on the outside.
yeah, he's more of a backup on the outside, and I think it's very unlikely he'll make the football team, but we'll see. He hasn't played since 2021, so
Yeah, that's
and
right.
he
He did like
retired.
Chiefs training camp and then he retired, right?
Yeah, he went tried to make a comeback last year with the Chiefs, who are always looking for speed. The Chiefs,
Yeah.
um, and then you know, he got to July right before training camp. Probably saw the rumor, the writing on the wall, and said, "I'm not going to make the team, so why bother?" That's my guess of what happened. And he just retired, and now he's trying to get back again. So, this is a good spot, though. Yeah, the Eagles need help as a backup outside receiver. And Nick Sirianni, talked about it ad nauseum with Quez Watkins about stretching the field and spacing matters. And, if he can be a decoy and stretch the field, who knows? He might get an opportunity. But very little production as the 9th overall pick. And as you mentioned, had a lot of injuries. So that was part of it in Cincinnati. But you're getting chance after chance after chance. So, not good, but
You
they
think
needed something.
Yeah, they needed something. I wonder if they're gonna
They'll
they're
probably
probably
still
still
bring it
looking,
in.
right?
Gonna,
Yeah.
yeah. I would not. Yeah, I would definitely say they're not done by any stretch of the imagination. And I brought up Corey Davis, who
Yeah.
was I think it's the same year. Yeah, 55th pick overall the same year. So that was a big disappointment for Tennessee. Took Corey Davis 5th overall, but he's got 273 receptions for 3,879 yards. So he's a disappointment in a whole different realm. He had a 900-yard season, 65 catches, almost 1,000 yards. He was more of a disappointment for where he was selected. You expect a little bit more out of the number 5 pick, and he's very similar, temporary retirement. He retired with the Jets and, applied for reinstatement. So that's a name I keeping an eye on. He hasn't signed with anybody yet. He's only 29. And that guy, I think if there's anything left, he can play a little bit. And that'd be, projected a darn good outside backup receiver.
Who was that, by
I
the
would
way?
dare
Sorry, I
say.
missed him.
Corey Davis,
Oh, yeah. Okay, Corey.
who I mentioned him on the show.
Yeah.
Same draft, number 5 pick when John Ross was number 9. Both disappointments, but different level of disappointment with Ross. Corey Davis was a solid player in Tennessee on his rookie deal. Just when you're picked 5th, you're supposed to be a superstar.
Yeah. I mean, Devin White, another fifth overall pick,
Yeah.
who resides in Philadelphia now. 2 good guests coming up today. We got Martin Frank, Paul Domo. So we'll have Martin Frank in hour number 1. He was also down at OTAs with Johnny Mack. So we'll pick his brain on what he took away from the OTAs, what his biggest takeaways were, if anything stood out to him. And then later on in hour number 2, we'll have Paul Domo, Hall of Fame selector, a guy that's been covering this team for a long time. And we'll see what he thinks of what he saw from the outside on OTAs this week. Johnny Mack, I want to give you a chance real quick and just, week 1 of OTAs is now in the books. You were down there for 1 day. Has anything changed for you? Has any of your thought processes going into the season changed on how they might play any position, a depth chart, roster, coaching, anything? I know it's just helmets and shorts, but I think it's the first time you got to see these guys for an extended period. Has any of your thinking on what they might do for the 24 season shifted?
Yeah, Kenny Pickett's going to put. No, I'm joking. No. I mean, it's 1 day in May. I do think it's going to be pretty easy to get Quinyon Mitchell on the field. It's going to be pretty easy to get Cooper DeJean on the field for Vic Fangio. I think their first impressions of those 2 players is really good, and That's a positive. That's not to say there's not going to be any hiccups. There's going to be hiccups with young players learning, especially this defense and this complicated system. So, but I do think they're going to be on track and able to play, and that's certainly a positive. But from the most part, I mean, as I mentioned, when you talk offensively, when you don't have Devontae out there, that's the thing about OTAs. So many guys are missing. So many guys are in and out because they're voluntary. It's more about just looking at the younger players and how quickly they can assimilate and how quickly they can pick up the new systems that they're been dropped into offensively or defensively. For the veteran players, you kind of default to the fact that they're veterans, and it's more about how they perform in training camp. And understand this as you talk, there's so many first round picks on the Eagles now. But a lot of them were failures in their original situations. And those are the kind of players you got to keep a tab on and see, all right, do they have anything left? Are they going to be helpful? What went on? Can they reboot their careers? Things like that. Most notably Saquon Barkley and Devin White, offense, defense. But that'll come in July and August and see what's left and see how they're going to utilize these guys.
Yeah, so good stuff. And I did see a tweet that you retweeted from our friend Clay Harbor. And we talked about how the defense looked like they were ahead of the offense, but Clay, former NFL player, former Eagle, actually, weighed in. He said, every team I've ever been on in my life, the defense always starts in front of the offense, no matter who the quarterback is, no matter what the circumstances are. So nothing to be concerned about there with the offense, but the defense did look solid. So that's a good thing. And I'm excited to hear that at least Quinion and DeJean look like they're NFL ready guys. Did anybody stick out that was like, whoa, he almost looks out of place? Like he doesn't look like he can play in the NFL. I guess you probably don't see much of that, but
no, I mean, there's guys I think that had some opportunities. Alberto, I think, had an opportunity with no CJ Uzomah. Dallas Goedert was there, but very limited, similar to AJ. I thought he had a lot of reps. He had made a nice play here and there, but also had a big drop. And I think consistency is always a big thing with Albert Agwegbanon. That was the knock on him in Denver. And so he's got Grant Calcaterra as well. This is probably it. It's like put up or shut up time, guys like that. Joseph Nada had an opportunity because Devontae wasn't there and Devontae Parker retired. And he wasn't great with that opportunity, and all of a sudden John Ross is here. So, but these are younger players that you're trying to seize the brass ring, or you want them to grab that brass ring. It's easier said than done. And it's one day. It's one day. They might have been great on Monday. They might have had a great day on Monday. They might have had a great day yesterday. There were three. Martin Frank's going to hop in. Yeah. I see him in the green room. We're only there for one day, but we can only talk about what we saw.
Exactly. So we'll get to our first commercial timeout coming up next. Martin Frank. Martin does great work covering the Eagles for the Delaware News Journal, and you can read him at Delaware Online. So we'll take our first commercial break. We'll come back. Good opening segment here on Football Friday. A little Kenny Pickett drama. A little John Ross. So Johnny Mack and I had a good opening segment here. We'll have Martin Frank coming up next. If you're in the chat, we appreciate you all. Make sure you drop a like and stay tuned right here on Birds 365. Martin Frank coming up next.
If you missed any of today's show on the JAKIB Media channel, listen to the podcast on your way home. Available on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.
field of life, First Trust Bank is there for you.
Champions on three. 1, 2, 3.
Because Philadelphia dreams deserve a Philadelphia bank.
Heading down the shore. Have a ball once more.
Here, imaginations run wild and time stands still. Because here, you can find the best of the Jersey Shore, all on one 5-mile island. So leave the old you behind and get lost in the woods.
Wild, wild, wildwood day.
Plan your stay in the Wildwoods today.
Hi, I'm Jim Muehlbronner, Managing Partner at Del Val Insurance Group. Give us a call. We're a local, knowledgeable agency, not an 800 number. Go Birds!
The greatest fans on earth. It's a bold statement, but would you expect anything less from Philadelphia? 58 years of heartache creates a toughness, a grit, a resolve not found in most. Sure, our prayers were answered, but now that we've had a taste, we're looking for more. Pondley Hockey, official partner of the Philadelphia Eagles. EAGLES, Eagles.
Welcome back in, everybody. A Football Friday edition of Birds 365. Joined now by Martin Frank from the Delaware News Journal. Read him online at Delaware Online. Martin, welcome to the show, man. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me. How are you guys?
Good to see you, Martin. Our buddy Ed Kraft, evidently it was brought to my attention that one of his overreactions really took off on the social media. Kenny Pickett, he said Kenny Pickett was sharper than Jalen Hurts, which I agree with, Martin, and it means absolutely nothing. Am I correct?
Yes. They're in shorts. There's no pass rush. He knows where he's going with the ball. All these plays are scripted and everything. So, you got to take it with a grain of salt. It was one day we saw 70 minutes?
70 minutes. You and I nailed it.
Yeah.
Exactly. I'm getting some feedback, Zander. Are you getting that?
Yeah. I think it's coming from Martin's
We'll
mic.
see what's that.
But,
Yeah, I'm with you, Martin. We nailed the 70 minutes, you and I. And that's typical for the Eagles. They never go much longer than that. But there were some themes I thought you could take out of it. Most notably for me, I thought Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean looked like NFL players. I think that's a very positive sign. The veterans, they don't need this, to be honest. So I don't get too worked up on guys performing. And there's certain guys that weren't there, DeVonta Smith, which hurt the offense as a whole because all of a sudden you sort of have to trickle down to Joseph Nada. So everything is kind of screwed up. But the young players, that's who I was focused on. Is that how you kind of take these things?
Yeah, I was impressed with Quinyon because there was one play where Kenny Pickett went deep. I think it was Jacob Harris.
I think it was Johnny Wilson. I know he peeled off the PBU you were talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Could have been Jacob. I think it was Johnny.
There were two plays. One was kind of early on, Harris ran kind of straight down the sideline, Pickett threw deep. I don't think it wasn't a PBU, but Quinyon was with them step by step. I mean, is Jacob Harris going to make the team? No.
But he can run. Jacob
Yeah,
Harris ran a
and he's
sub
been in the
4.4. Yeah.
NFL for, he's been in the NFL for 3 years. He's played in like a handful of games and everything like that. So I mean, it's not like he's some random guy off the street.
Yeah.
And Mitchell was with them step for step. You know, had good coverage, and then the play you mentioned, I mean, that was good too. He peeled off the guy who was covering, went and broke up a pass intended for Johnny Wilson. So that was a good play. I didn't see a whole lot, DeJean making plays, but he was kind of used all over the place. Like,
Yeah.
the first rep he was nickel, and then later on, they put him on the outside. I think this was with the third team, and he looked good. He didn't get beat. He kind of stayed with this guy and everything like that. So, those two especially were kind of impressive. I didn't really notice a whole lot from the other guys. Jalix Hunt. They had him. They had him drop a few times, but I didn't really notice him making any big plays.
Yeah.
That.
Well, they started the other guys like really deep on the third team. Trotter was on the third team. Jalix Hunt was on the third team. And that's understandable. They want to, even guys that have a chance maybe to earn some playing time. And most notably, you talk about linebacker. You want to start somebody like Jeremiah Trotter slowly, and then hopefully he can get to the second team, maybe early in training camp, and who knows, maybe even get some first team reps at some point. But Devin White, I thought, was impressive. If you want to talk about veteran players, and I have not been high on that signing. I've probably told you on this show and in person, look, I don't think he was that good in Tampa Bay. I think he was overrated. But he looked good. It's essentially a passing camp. He knows he's in coverage. He doesn't have to worry about the run. So all this factors in. But he had that one wheel route. Saquon Barkley didn't have a step to breathe on that thing.
Yeah.
It was pretty impressive.
Yeah. Devin White, I was also impressed from what I saw from him. And you mentioned his kind of I don't know if I'd call it disappointing, but not as well as expected career in Tampa Bay. He had the one really good year when they, got to the Super Bowl and everything. But by the end of last season, he pretty much lost his job. In the playoff game against the Eagles, he was not the starting linebacker. So yeah, there were a lot of question marks coming in about him. Like obviously low bar with the Eagles, considering their linebacker core last year and everything. But still, you want to, if you're signing a guy like Devin White, I mean, the Eagles are expecting a lot from him, and he's a bigger guy than I thought.
Yeah, looked a little bigger than probably people had hoped. To be honest. He looked big. He looked stocky, but he could still run.
Yeah, I mean that was the most impressive thing. I mean, you mentioned the play with Saquon Barkley. He was with them step for step on the wheel route. That's not easy to do. And you can even there was one play where he, he's kind of had a reputation in Tampa Bay as being a really good blitzer. Able to get to the quarterback, and he kind of saw that. One of the rush attempts, like him and I believe it might have been Bryce Huff on the other side. They kind of came in and, they had to stop, obviously.
Yeah.
But, you can see that potential there. I never saw that really a whole lot last year from the linebackers the Eagles had. So, I mean, I'd say right off the bat, Devin White signing is an upgrade. We did not see Nakobe Dean because I guess
now, how concerned are you about that? He's close, obviously. He was stretching Nakobe. You muted yourself, Martin.
No, I'm mute. Sorry, I'm going to try and mute Martin if we're talking, just because we're getting some feedback, Martin. I don't know if there's anything you can do about it. Maybe just lower your audio. I don't know if that will help though. So if you're muted, feel free to yell at me because I'm muting you out just so we don't get feedback on the show.
All right, Nakobe though, as you mentioned, Martin. He's rehabbing from this Liz Frank surgery. He's very close to returning. But one thing that was interesting about Devin is he's not that they have a green dot, but he was leading the defense. He was the middle linebacker. He was the calling when they huddled, when they had the little sugar huddles. He was the one calling out the coverage and doing that. In theory, that's Nakobe's job. Are you worried about Nakobe seizing that job, or does he have to prove it to you? I mean, or is it just going to default back to Nakobe Dean?
I think it's mostly going to default back to Nakobe Dean. I mean, I don't really take a whole lot from these spring practices. Once they're done with their mandatory minicamp, like that first week of June, I mean, they got 7 weeks before training starts, and I would be 99.999% sure that Nakobe Dean will be ready to go when training camp starts. I mean, I think that's a pretty fair assumption. And
well, yeah, he's going to be healthy, but I guess my question is, do you think before it was like Nakobe, and then all right, maybe we'll find something with Devin White. Now Zach Ball's involved, and the fact that Big Fangio seems to like Zach Ball as well. Do you think there's going to be more of a competition? There's no doubt he's going to be healthy by that point, but do you think there's going to be more of a competition?
I think it's more of a fallback than a competition. I mean, we saw last year they didn't really have any. They didn't really have a plan B when Nakobe got hurt. Both the first and the second time. So I think when you look at a guy like Zach Bond, when you look, I mean, obviously Trotter, if he's able to kind of get into show that he can play. I mean, that's not, I think those guys are more fallbacks in case something happens to Nakobe, in case he's not what they thought he would be. But I also think they have every reason to expect that the Nakobe that we've been waiting for since they drafted him in the 3rd round is the guy they'll see, because we haven't really seen a whole lot of that. He barely played his rookie year because they had Kaiser White and TJ Edwards, and it was more of a redshirt year. And then, last year when he did get the chance, he only played in 5 games, and he wasn't great in the 5 games that he did play in. I mean, I think everybody kind of realizes that. So I think they were like, you know what, we better have a fallback in case, it doesn't work out that way. But I think he's going to get the not only the benefit of the doubt, but every chance possible. I mean, I think they will go as long as they can with him, because they are counting on him to be their main guy. At linebacker, Devin White, obviously good enough to start. He's kind of like the Kaiser White of 2 years ago. And then if something goes wrong, maybe Trotter, maybe Zach Bond, maybe Van Sumeren. I mean, I think they just want to make sure they have more of a fallback option than in the past, or than last year, because they didn't really have one, and that kind of blew up in their faces.
Martin, I want to ask about the cornerback room. By the way, I think it is put up or shut up time for Nakobe Dean. But the cornerback, I thought it was interesting. I know it's OTA, so not everybody's out there. There was no James Bradberry, but I thought it was interesting. Isaiah Rodgers was on the outside, and then they started Maddox on the inside and slot at the nickel corner. Do you think that that's a shoe-in for if he's healthy? Is Avonte Maddox going to be the slot corner on this team? And where do you see Isaiah Rodgers? A lot of people have talked about him playing nickel corner, but he played outside in Indianapolis, and he was pretty darn good at it in Indy. So just how do you see that position breaking down?
Yeah, I thought it was also interesting because we did see Avonte also playing some safety.
Yeah.
And, the one thing John will tell you is Vic Fangio loves versatility in his guys. So, I mean, the answer to your question about Isaiah Rodgers is yes. I mean, there are a lot of scenarios. Let's say they want to move on from Bradberry regardless. They've already made that decision June 1st or June 2nd. They're cutting him. And whether or not Quignon's ready to start week 1 or not, maybe they'll go with Isaiah Rodgers. And if Quignon's ready, that maybe they'll go with him. But I think Rodgers, if he doesn't start week 1 outside corner, you could put him, if something happens to Avonte, maybe they're not convinced that Cooper DeJean is ready. there's so many different scenarios, and I think that's the kind of thing Vic Fangio wants from his defensive backs, is for those guys to be ready to play whenever they're called upon and wherever they're called upon. I mean, let's say Avonte Maddox, something happens to Reed Blankenship, and Sidney Brown's not quite ready from recovering from his knee surgery last year. I mean, you could see Avonte Maddox there,
Right.
maybe as the third safety. Maybe DeJean is great and he beats out Avonte Maddox to start at nickel, and Avonte becomes the third safety. I mean, I think everything, basically to answer your question, everything is on the table. I think they're going to spend the spring. I think they're going to spend a good part of training camp just kind of mixing and matching guys and seeing what works out best. I mean, I think they've kind of had the philosophy in the past, and I think it's especially true with Fangio, is it doesn't really matter. I mean, positions other than Slay being outside. I mean, they want the best five guys back there at defensive back, and they'll make that work. I mean, it doesn't really. I don't think anybody's going to be pigeonholed into a position. I think you're going to see a lot of guys moving around, and you're going to look up and you say, wait a minute, Avonte Maddox, he's there at safety, and Isaiah Rodgers is at nickel, and maybe Cooper DeJean is on the outside.
Yeah, interestingly enough,
Yeah.
I think he's kind of the wild card there, because I think they want to get him on the field, but I also don't think they want him to be a safety. Maybe they'll put him there, but that's my opinion. I think they want him to be a cornerback, and I just don't know where they're going to do that. And you're right, they're probably going to shuffle a lot to make that happen.
Yeah, I mean, I would think DeJean, probably his best position would be nickel, but
Yeah.
he's played outside before. He's even played some safety, and
Yeah.
more.
Well, a lot of bodies this year, and they're not going to. Last year, they had so many injuries inside. The Abante injury just killed them. And really going back to preseason with Zach McPherson getting hurt. So the backup got hurt, and then the starter got hurt in the nickel. And then it was just musical chairs the entire season. We don't even talk about poor Zach anymore because they have so many bodies at cornerback. It's going to be really difficult for him to make the team. Yeah, and I'm with you. He's going to throw everybody at everything and see what sticks. But I do think they want to get Cooper DeJean on the field as quickly as possible. So we'll see how it all shakes out. You mentioned Bradberry a little bit. We have one more week of OTAs, Martin. Then the Eagles are going to have a mandatory minicamp for the first time in the Nick Sirianni era. Is James Bradberry going to be there? That's early June, right after June 1st.
Yes. I'd put it at 50-50. I mean, actually, probably better chances that he will be there. I mean, yes, they can cut him with a post-June 1st designation. Doesn't mean they have to cut him on June 1st or June 2nd. I mean, they can take it in the training camp. They could take it, as far as they want. I mean, they have to be convinced, that the guys they have are better options. But I'd say maybe 70-30 that he's there.
Well, I would, personally, I'd love to keep him around, even for just similar to Slay. That's a good sounding board for Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean, a guy who's played a long time at an all-pro level. He's very smart, very savvy zone corner. Those guys can learn a lot of things, but there's also the human nature of it. And James sees the writing on the wall, and you're kind of dicking him over if you're keeping him, into training camp, hoping maybe there's an injury somewhere else and somebody gives you a day 3 pick. So it's more difficult for Howie than just, we'll just keep him until we keep him, because you don't necessarily want unhappy. And James is very professional, but you just don't want unhappy people around who know they're on their way out the door.
Yeah. And you go back to 2 years ago when they first signed Bradberry. I think it was late May. And I remember him being upset because, the Giants kind of strung him along. He was kind of, he knew the Giants were going to release him, and he was kind of hoping they would do it in March, because then obviously teams haven't spent their free agent money, and he would have gotten a lot more. I mean, as it turned out, he came to the Eagles on a 1-year prove it deal, and he proved it. I mean, he played great. He was an all-pro, and he got the 3-year extension. And I think he kind of knows the writing is on the wall now. But obviously, he's older now. He's going to be 31 this summer. I mean, I don't think he would be upset, or I think he would understand better that the Eagles didn't release him right away in March with the June 1st designation, because, there's not going to be a huge market for him, especially coming off, the year he had last year. So, I mean, I think James, like you mentioned, James Bradberry's a smart guy. He knows the writing's on the wall. Chances are the Eagles are going to move on, and it'll probably happen sometime during that 6-7 week off-season period before training camp starts. I mean, I agree with you. I don't think Howie's going to keep him in late August and say, all right, well, these guys have shown me enough, we're going to let you go, thanks for the memories. But I also do think that if Bradberry's around, like for that mandatory minicamp, like you said, he's going to be kind of like the same Slay is, helping those guys out as much as he can. I mean, he wants to keep playing and everything. So, he's not going to like pout his way out the door or anything like that. So, for now, he's kind of like in a no man situation. He probably knows the writing's on the wall, and just see how it plays out. But I wouldn't be surprised, maybe like 70-30 if he'll be there for the mandatory minicamp, and then go from there.
Martin, I want to ask about Vic Fangio. We talked all about the defense now, and a lot of comments coming out of the Miami guys, and some of them are getting a lot of hate from it. I love to hear that some of the Eagles defensive players backed him up, namely Jalen Carter. I loved what Jalen had to say, but just your overall take on that. To me, it doesn't matter. To me, it kind of seemed like a low blow from some of those guys. I almost think it created and maybe it didn't, but I could see it creating almost like a little bit of a, now the Eagles players are almost more fired up to play for this guy. Maybe not, but I could see that being the case. Just your thoughts on Vic. You guys got a chance to talk to him once now, and how you think he'll fit this team.
Yeah, I mean, he's a defensive guru, basically. I mean, he got a head coaching job in Denver. His teams were always good defensively. I mean, Miami last year was kind of up and down, and, I don't know what exactly went on there, but yeah, I've seen some of the social media posts from Dolphins guys, and we asked, like you mentioned, Jalen Carter, said he had good things to say about him. Even Slay, I mean, he had an interesting comment. He was kind of like, it doesn't matter who the defensive coordinator is, we're going to play hard for him. And, you could tell, last year was difficult with Deshaun Desai, at first. I mean, the only reason he gets replaced, at that point in the season is obviously because players, were kind of like, I don't know if this guy has what it takes. So, and obviously they replaced him with Matt Patricia, who Slay clashed with in Detroit. But, Slay never said anything bad about him, like once he took over. So, if the defense is good, then Fangio is good. And if the defense is not, then, Fangio's not the right guy. And
that pretty much sums it up. Yeah. If you do well,
you're going to have a whole new coaching staff in 25 if, Fangio isn't good, because Nick Sirianni's job is kind of tied to him as well. And, you'll have a new set of coaches in 2025 and take it from there. So, it's in everyone's best interest to make sure Vic Fangio works out. And, he's got the track record and the history. And, that's the defense the Eagles have wanted to play for the past few years, by hiring his disciples and Gannon, and then, obviously Sean Desai. So, now you got the guy.
Yeah. And the coaching stuff is interesting, Martin, because I do think, Nick Sirianni's on the clock now. So he's got this team has to perform. And I start thinking about, it's a very talented team, but I start thinking about how can the wheels come off? And for every team, it's about the quarterback. If the quarterback gets hurt, but past the quarterback,
Evidently, we'll be okay, John.
They are thin at wide receiver. I mean, they are painfully thin. And you can't legislate injuries. You mentioned a couple of years ago, TJ Edwards, Kaiser White. Well, the reason Nakobe Dean never got on the field as a rookie, because those guys were healthy and they played every stinking play for the entire year through the Super Bowl, which is phenomenal. And if that happens with AJ and Devontae, you're fine. But boy, if one of them even misses a little bit of time, your entire offense changes because they don't have anything behind those guys. That concerns me.
That concerns me too. I mean, it's a big question mark. I mean, Howie has always said, player acquisition period goes all the way to the trade deadline, which I think this year is now the first week in November. I mean, I would not be surprised if he did something between now and then to get like a true number 3 receiver. I mean, I was kind of surprised. I mean, I obviously understand why they took the 2 cornerbacks first and second round and everything, but they had a chance to draft a 3rd wide receiver in the 1st or 2nd round, a guy who can learn and kind of step in and play at the same time. And they didn't do it. They didn't really sign anybody in free agency as a number 3 guy. I mean, they
Paris
did.
Campbell, he looked good. I'll give Paris, but I'm talking about outside because if Paris is, if it works out, he's going to be a slot receiver, and it might not work out, but at least for one day, he looked pretty sharp. He looked quick. He looked okay. He looked like an NFL receiver to me. Everybody else did not, at least at this stage of their careers. And I'm mainly concerned about the backup out. Now they bring in John Ross, who was at their rookie camp, but I mean, he was a bust in Cincinnati. We all know. I mean, at this point, Quez Watkins, I joke, looks like Randy Moss compared to the group behind AJ and Devontae. It's not good.
And maybe it's a part of the fact that, if you're a number 3 receiver, are you going to want to come to the Eagles knowing that,
Yeah, that's fair. That's
and
fair.
Devontae Smith each, catch close to 100 balls every year, and Dallas Goedert gets his share of touches. I mean,
yeah,
maybe that's not enticing to somebody. I mean, I could definitely understand that. So maybe that makes it a little bit harder for Howie to get someone like that. I mean, maybe he just has to do it by trade, and
and that's why you needed to be a younger guy. You needed to be a guy on his rookie deal who's not. But you want to see some potential for developing into something. I don't necessarily see that. Maybe Johnny Wilson hits the ground running, but boy, between their 5th and 6th round picks, everybody's got, Trotter might push for playing time. Anais Smith might push for playing time. Anais has not been healthy yet. He's more of a slot receiver. Trevor Keegan started on the 3rd team at left guard. He wasn't even getting reps, at least from what I saw at right guard. You can't count on day 3 picks, right?
No, you can't. I mean, but in the history, or at least the recent history in the NFL, is like some of those day 3 picks at wide receiver end up being really good. The Steelers have had their share of success with guys like that. Antonio Brown was a 6th round pick.
Yeah. That'll help. Yeah, if they can find
Deontay Johnson, I believe he was a 5th round pick. It's just, I mean, that's why I was kind of surprised. I thought they might get a receiver in the 1st or 2nd round, because that's kind of like the best way to get a number 3 receiver who's ready to play, or more ready to play than a guy like Johnny Wilson or Anais Smith. Especially Smith coming off an injury who's not cleared yet, so he's already a little bit further behind than he would be. And that way you kind of keep the pipeline going. But yeah, I mean, they're going to have to do something, because if like you mentioned, AJ Brown or Devontae Smith get hurt, they're in a world of trouble. They do have Saquon Barkley, so that's a little bit better. And maybe Goddard stays healthy. Maybe Paris Campbell steps up and becomes like a good slot receiver. He hasn't really lived up to that. Like, I think he averaged like 5 yards a catch.
5.3 yards per catch.
Like,
I don't even know how you run a 4.340 and average 5.3 yards a catch.
Yeah, I mean that is like crazy. So yeah, I don't know. Definitely. I mean, it's first world problem, I guess.
Yeah,
Are we being
it
too
is.
nitpicky?
It is,
Like, we
yeah.
have Devontae and AJ Brown. Maybe a wide receiver, a good backup wide receiver, is just too much to ask for.
Yeah, I mean, but I definitely would not be surprised if at some point before the season starts, or even right up to the trade deadline, that's a position they address. Obviously, you want to do it sooner before something happens and you're kind of in desperation mode, and you're probably giving up like a high early round pick because you're desperate and you need somebody. But you know how he usually finds a way to do something like that, whether it's in the summer or even like once the season starts. So.
M. Frank NFL. Make sure you follow Martin on X. You can read him at DelawareOnline.com. Does a tremendous job there covering this football team. Kellen Moore. We haven't talked about Kellen Moore. Saw a little bit of motion. A little bit more bunch formations. The Eagles typically went 2-by-2 in their stale Nick Sirianni offense. That's self-described. I'm not criticizing. That's what Nick called it. Anything else you see from Kellen Moore that you said, "Ooh, that's different"? A1, but
yeah, I just remember like you, like seeing the motion, and I'm like, oh my gosh, what is that? But yeah, no, I think maybe we'll get a better idea in training camp and stuff. But like 7-on-7, it's passing anyway.
Yeah,
Um,
it's glorified passing camp.
yeah.
So people are talking about offensive linemen, defensive linemen. You don't even get to see them. Like
No.
Jalen Carter, we got to see him and talk to him after practice, but he's not in 7-on-7 drills. None of the offensive linemen are.
No, and they're not even in pads, so it's not like
Yeah.
the one drills that you see in training camp with offensive linemen, defensive linemen going. They were just all in their groups, like off to the side.
Yeah.
The offensive linemen with in Stoutland University, the defensive linemen with their going against those tackling dummies or whatever it is. So yeah, you have no idea, and obviously you're not really playing against a defense that's covering you like pretty tightly or anything like that. So it's kind of hard to gauge exactly what Kellen Moore's system is. But yeah, we did see some motion and a lot of passes, and we'll see more when we're there next week, and probably during the 3 days of minicamp, and when we come back in July, early August, we'll get a better idea exactly what the offense is about.
Martin, what's Saquon Barkley roles going to be in this offense, and how is it going to differ from DeAndre Swift and Miles Sanders, who really were two pretty productive backs here in Philadelphia? How do you see Saquon playing out in this offense?
Ideally, you would see Saquon like never coming out of the game. I mean, he's more so than the other two guys, a true 3-down back. I mean, you have 3rd and long. Saquon's a great receiver. He's good in pass protection. You don't have to take him off the field for Kenny Gainwell, which in the past, when you took him off, when you took Swift or Miles Sanders off the field for Kenny Gainwell, well, you kind of knew what you were getting. You kind of had an idea what the Eagles were going to be doing. And Barkley, if he's healthy, he's as good a running back as there is in the NFL. He can do pretty much everything, and I think that's kind of what you're going to see. Like even in the 70 minutes of practice that we saw the other day, I mean, we saw Saquon Barkley running wheel routes. We saw him like getting open in the flat. He's a tremendous running back, and the Eagles, if it all works out, will never take him off the field. I mean, how long can he last playing? You know, getting those many touches and everything like that. That's another question.
Yeah, I think this coaching staff, and this is going to piss people off, Martin. They still want Kenny Gainwell involved. They love Kenny Gainwell. I don't think there's a player who got more traffic in that practice than Kenny Gainwell, as far as getting balls thrown. Now it was with the second team, and it was Kenny Pickett. Maybe I don't think anybody got that. They like Kenny Gainwell.
They also kind of just drafted his replacement, though, didn't they? And
Yeah,
Will
but that's
Shipley?
Howie. That's Howie. And by the way, Will Shipley was really fighting the football as a pass catcher. Really fighting the football. He had a drop. He bobbled one that he managed to haul in. And I'm going to piss people off. I'm going to Ed Kratz people because Ed pissed people off with Kenny Pickett. Kenny Gainwell is a better pass catcher than Saquon Barkley.
Ooh,
He's a natural pass catcher. You've never seen it because the Eagles don't utilize it. That guy can catch the football. And when he had a quarterback more adept at just dumping it off with the second team and the sharp Kenny Pickett, he was catching the football.
I don't know if I agree with that, but I mean, I think Saquon Barkley.
But that's not an insult because I think Kenny Gainwell is a high level catcher of the football for a running back, very high level. So it's not an insult to Saquon Barkley.
Didn't he formerly play wide receiver a
Yeah,
little
he
bit
played
at Memphis?
wide receiver in Memphis at times.
Yeah, but I mean, I think if you had your choice of
No, I'm not comparing them as players.
yeah,
No.
all right, I see. What
But
you're saying.
I just think the Eagles coaching staff likes Kenny Gainwell and wants him involved. And they're also going to try to not kill Saquon Barkley. They don't want him with 350 touches because he'll be dead by week 17, week 18. So I think that factors into it as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think they'll go as far as they can go with Saquon Barkley. I mean, I think they do like Kenny Gainwell as a receiver. I don't think he's quite proven that he can run the ball. That's been an issue, and they have a much better alternative now than they've had the past 2 years. And whatever they can do to keep Saquon healthy and on the field as much as possible. I mean, I think that's their top priority. I think that supersedes anything they'd want to do with Kenny Gainwell. Like if, I mean, I guess the point I'm trying to make is like in the past, you knew Kenny Gainwell was going to be on the field for certain situations. And
That's not, that part's not going to be.
right.
But I did see 121 personnel. Actually, I didn't see it. I saw with two running backs on the field. I think it was Dave Zangaro. I saw they ran a swing pass to Kenny Gainwell, and it was a nice little play. And Dave, I believe, said later Barkley was in the slot on that particular play, and they were using Barkley as the decoy to get the football to Kenny Gainwell, which would piss people off to no end. But that's what happened.
Wow. I did not notice that. But yeah, I'm sure they're going to try pretty much every kind of combination and permutation that you can get in the spring and even in training camp. And, we'll see some crazy stuff. But I think when push comes to shove, I mean, you're not going to have two running backs on the field at the expense of like AJ.
No, not certainly. Hopefully not a lot, certainly.
Yeah.
But it was an interesting tweak. And that's, part of it with the stale offense and hopefully Kellen Moore getting some interesting ideas. Martin Frank always has interesting ideas. He's also covering a little bit of Phillies, the best team in baseball so far. So enjoy that, Martin. And I will see you at OTAs next week. And then we got a mandatory minicamp for the first time in a very long time. That'll be exciting.
Yeah, can't wait. I believe it's the first mandatory minicamp since 2019. The
Doug Peterson era. Yeah, Nick's never had one.
Right, 2020 was canceled, and Nick's never had. I think, did Nick have one scheduled his first year? And
yes, he had. They had one scheduled.
But and he said if you show up for OTAs, right, we'll cancel it or whatever.
Well, that was at the end of the COVID era, so there were still some protocols in place, and the players weren't comfortable coming in because of all the COVID nonsense. So they negotiated and said, well, if you show up for voluntary work,
that's right,
we'll scrap the mandatory minicamp. And it's never been back, but it will be back this year and probably needed after the collapse last year. So that'll be exciting. Yeah. Because that's more, it's not real football, but it's inching a little bit closer.
Yes.
Yeah. Martin, thanks for joining the show, man. We'll catch up with you soon.
All right. Thanks for having me, and see y'all soon, I guess.
Thanks, Martin.
There's Martin Frank joining us from Delaware News Journal. Make sure you guys read him at DelawareOnline.com. Always tough when there's, mic stuff, just because I'm trying to unmute, and everybody gets mad at me. Like, there's not much we can do, and there's not much Martin can do either. There's no knock against him, but sometimes when you use a phone, the mics get janky. So sorry about the feedback or anybody that had the feedback, but still a great segment. Martin does great work for the Delaware News Journal, and he covered the OTA very well. So make sure you follow him on Twitter and check out all his work. Johnny Mac and I will come back in hour number 2. We'll have Paul Domo. So in about 16 minutes, we'll have Paul Domo. And I want to talk to Johnny Mac about the D-line. There's not a lot of D-line talk during OTAs, as John mentioned. It's a lot of 7-on-7. So there's not a lot of line movement. But I do have a question for Johnny Mac on the defensive line, and we'll talk about that coming up next on Birds 365. If you're in the chat, we appreciate all you guys. Make sure you drop us a like if you're enjoying Birds 365, and keep it locked here. D-line coming up next on Birds 365.
If you missed any of today's show on the JAKIB Media channel, listen to the podcast on your way home. Available on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.
Is the best vacation one that you find, or one you get lost in? One that takes you to new heights, or reminds you to go with the flow? To get your feet wet and your wheels spinning? One that lets you find your own rhythm, or get carried away? Find the best of yourself. Get lost in the woods. Plan your stay in the Wildwoods today.
Go passionately. Go fearlessly. Go confidently.
Go Birds!
Go confidently towards your goals with First Trust, Philly's hometown bank for nearly 90 years, and the official bank of the Philadelphia Eagles. We're focused on getting you over the goal line. So go with conviction. Go with trust.
Go Birds!
And go forward with us by your side. First Trust Bank, the official bank of Philadelphia dreams. Oh, and go Birds.
Listen, if we even think you owe us money, you won't know what hit you. We'll put liens on everything you own. Raid your bank accounts, retirement fund, pension. You'll open up your paycheck and cry because we'll already have the money. We'll haul you into federal court and you might even go to jail. Hey, it's our job.
Don't fight the IRS alone. The Tax Doctor is here to help you negotiate your tax bill and reduce your stress. Our experts will fight for you using IRS guidelines to stop any IRS actions like bank levies or wage garnishments. Plus, eliminate penalties and interest and reduce your past tax bill so you pay the IRS less. Help is here to deal with the IRS to reduce your stress. If you owe $10,000 or more in back taxes, do not call the IRS alone. Call a tax doctor now for a tax emergency analysis.
I'd have my mom call the number on the screen. You come see me alone. We'll work it out.
Eagles. Eagles.
Welcome back in, everybody. Football Friday edition of Birds 365 following the week one of OTAs. So Eagles are done for the week. They were on Monday, then they were Wednesday, Thursday. They're off today, and they'll be back on Tuesday, which is when Birds 365 will be back. So just a reminder for everybody, we will not be on Monday for Memorial Day. So paying a little bit of a nod to our veterans and all the people that have served in our country. The show is not possible without you guys. So we do appreciate anybody who has served our armed forces. Memorial Day is a big one for our family. My brother is a veteran. So we always try and pay homage to the military, and we appreciate anybody that served in the military. So no show on Monday for Memorial Day. Johnny Mac, let's talk D-line, man. I tied this conversation about Jordan Davis yesterday. Let's start with him. What's your expectations of him? Or I know we've talked about how it's kind of a tough situation because everybody wants him to be a stat stuffer. That's what you expect when you take a guy with a 14th or 13th overall pick. That's not what he's going to be. But what's your expectation for him coming into the year? It is year 3. He's almost on that extension year. So just, do you expect him to take a big step forward? Or what do you expect his role to be this year?
Talking about Jordan?
Yeah, Jordan Davis.
Yeah, same role. Yeah, we talked about this extensively.
Yeah, on the defensive breakdown.
Yeah, I've been on this from day one. I can't say I'm surprised. It is disappointing. His role is what his role is, and his role is to make it easier for others. And by and large, he's done that. He's been a very good player. I'd like to see the conditioning improve. I'd like to see him play a little bit more. But for those who want sacks, look inward, try to understand the role. He's trying to engage blockers. He's trying to keep blockers tied up so others can make plays. He does it very effectively. And that was my concern when the Eagles selected him so early, that he was never going to live up to the hype because people just want sacks and they want that number.
Well, forget about for a second. Forget about what everybody else wants, what the fans want, even what I want. What does he have to do for the Eagles to say, okay, we're going to pay this guy his second contract, big money? Like we talked about it on the defensive breakdown, so I understand the role. But for anybody that hasn't seen that or that is tuning in now, what does he have to do to do that to satisfy, Howie Roseman's the guy that's going to give him the contract? What is Howie expecting from Jordan Davis?
Well, I would think that Jordan would be one of those players already in line to be extended after this season. He can't be extended until after this season. Right. Barring injury or barring something catastrophic happening. The question is, how high is it going to go? Right. And I've always used Haloti Ngata in his prime, not when he was here at the end of his career, for people that remember Haloti when he was with the Eagles. When he was with the Ravens, he was the best nose tackle in football, arguably the best nose tackle of his generation. And that, I think, is the ceiling of what you hope for that he could be. But he's already proven that he is a difference maker when it comes to the role and doing what he's supposed to do. And that's basically helping turn 1st and 10 into 2nd and long. He's already been effective in that role. And as long as the Eagles want to play this scheme, they need a player like that. I mean, it's
so is the ceiling like a Vince Wilfork? That would be
Vince is another good example.
Almost 170 games for Vince and 108 and 189 games, and he had 16 sacks total. So he's not a sack guy. That's not what Jordan's not going to be a sack guy.
No. And could you like to see interior push and make it more difficult a little bit more? There's always room for improvement. but he's been effective. My one issue with Jordan is that he needs to get in better football condition, not Eagles autism challenge condition. And he looks great for
play 17, 18, 19, 20 ball games and be ready to play.
Yeah. And he came from, we talk about it all the time. He came from a school that is so deep and so talented, that guys didn't have to play a lot of snaps. They were blowing a lot of people out. And he wasn't used to playing a lot of same thing happened to Jalen Carter, who's a different type of player and more of a pass rusher and more of the kind of guy that's going to get splashy and people are going to like. And I think he's going to be one of the best pass rushing defensive tackles in the NFL. But he had some conditioning issues as well because he wasn't used to playing a whole lot of snaps. And
now he was a rookie, so I think he gets extended a little bit more grace through that year one versus Jordan was coming off year two. I just wondered,
and by the way,
he complicated situation with one. Fletcher Cox had 690 snaps, so like who's going to fill all of those snaps? I know Jalen's going to have an increased role, Jordan, but then you also have the Milton Williams contract conversation coming up, Jordan Davis extension coming up after the year, Jalen Carter's in 2 years. Like, if they're going to commit, are they going to pay all three of those DTs, or do they view maybe Milton Williams as more versatile than Jordan Davis and they would pay him and keep him with Jalen Carter?
Well, they play different positions. That's one of the things. Jordan Davis, I say it all the time, and we talked about it, and I encourage everybody to look at it when we talk about this scheme. And when we did that breakdown, you can find it on the YouTube page. But they play different positions. Now, that doesn't mean at times there's a bunch of different techniques, and it starts from zero technique, which is a true nose tackle that's going to be right in front of the center and bang. And you go from that to shade technique, 3 technique, 4-eye technique, 5 technique. All these are interior players. And there's a big difference between zero and shade and playing 3 technique. When you're mainly asked to, think Fletcher Cox in his prime, think Aaron Donald, think Jalen Carter now, which you're more of a pass rushing threat versus a guy who is 2 gapping, which you're not required to do in this defense. They call it gap and a half. You have a primary gap you're responsible for and a secondary gap. And Jordan's the guy, as I said, who's his main job, if you want to boil it down, is to turn first and long into second and long. And if he does that, he's doing his job. And you might, because there's so much substitution, if you got him in second and long, say first and 10 turns in second and 12, you might pull him off the field, and you might want Jalen Carter and Milton Williams on the field. You might have a 4-man rush with Josh Sweat and Bryce Huff. You may want those guys on the field. But he's doing his job if you get to second and long. Now, every team in the NFL, no matter what system they're using, defensive system, is playing 2 interior players, at least in starting level snaps.
Well, that was my question about Milton. I know he's not the same guy as Jordan, but maybe would they rather just do without a nose type of position? Like, not every team in the NFL is using a nose to push everybody back. I get what they're doing, but I just wonder if it gets complicated when the contracts come up, when the defense come up. Let me go to James Carver real quick. He just dropped us $50, which is tremendous. James, thank you for the support, man. We appreciate it. We hope you have a great Memorial Day weekend. The problem with JD is that fans do not understand D-line play. He's great. If an interior D player screams upfield, he leaves gaps and destroys integrity. He uses hips very well to get off and negates doubles because he doesn't align with head, but on hips to gap. So it sounds like James is on board with what you're saying. He's good at what.
Yeah, I mean, you're changing the whole defensive scheme if you don't have a nose tackle in the shade in this particular defense, then you're not playing this defense. And then, yeah, you might not need a nose tackle, but you're playing a different defense, which is fine, but that's not what Big Fangio is going to do. So, what I was getting to, I mean, if you look at it, and again, no matter the scheme, it could be Bix, it could be, Baltimore is now all the rage in what they do, and everybody's trying to copy them. Could be Jim Schwartz, who people were used to here, was a traditional, more of a traditional, what would be considered a 4-3, although everything's nickel in today's world. Could be any type of defense. You're going to have at least 2 starting interior defensive linemen, which means there's 32 teams. There's 64 guys. As a rookie, PFF had Jordan Davis at 26 in the NFL.
Well.
Last year, he was 30th. That's a high level. That's high level defensive tackle play. Whether people recognize it or not is another.
Just
and
doesn't
James is
jump
right.
out at you. Yeah.
And James is right. Jordan does his role very, very effectively. The one issue I have with him is he needs to do it a little bit more. But even last year, he's so good, I'm trying to get him on the field. Last year, he averaged about 30 snaps a game. I want to get that number up to 40. Can he do that? And he's had the history in both years. It's fair to point out he's been better early than late. And he got hurt for a while in his rookie season as well. And they brought in Linval Joseph and Ndamukong Suh, as they were a little panic-stricken, by the way, when he got hurt. And they had to look at some other guys playing that position, and it just wasn't working. There might not be a bigger disconnect from inside the building and outside the building than on Jordan Davis. When you talk about impactful players, one of my concerns about how this season can go poorly, they don't have backups for A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith on the outside. They don't have a backup for Jordan Davis at nose tackle. And if he goes down, if he's not playing, and you already saw this in 2021, it's a completely different defense. And then you have to play more 4-man fronts. You have to play more 40 fronts. And that's not where Vic Fangio wants to live on first down.
Yeah, so I guess then the question, James, thank you, man, for the super chat. We appreciate it a ton. It goes a long way in helping support the channel. So we do appreciate that and your viewership every day here on Birds 365. I guess the question then becomes, for me, how much do you pay a guy like that? Like, if his ideal role is get the 2nd to 12 and then you might take him off the field, I know he's an impactful guy because that probably changes the look of your entire defense. But, like, if he's not only playing,
Yeah,
so
the
many
Eagles are
snaps.
going to pay him. He's going to get a lot of money. It's a matter. You're not going to get as much money as Jalen Carter type when Jalen's up. But he's going to get a lot of money because they recognize the impact of that type of player. And, they're very happy with Jordan Davis. Very happy. Anybody who thinks he's playing for a contract, as long as he plays the way he has been playing, and again, everything is in the NFL is contingent on health and things like that.
Yeah, of course.
But he will be one of those foundational guys that they look to extend as early as possible. And, that's one, when you talk about Milton Williams, that's one thing that concerns, because I'm a big Milton Williams fan. I think he's an underrated player.
Yeah.
The fact that the Eagles haven't extended him concerns me a little bit, because that means they don't think as highly of him as I do. Or, you have to be, maybe Milton and his agent are just smart and they realize he's going to play more this season and he's betting on himself. That could always be part of it as well. But that's a player. It surprised me the Eagles haven't extended.
Yeah, is it going to be tough though, John, to pay 3 DTs? Like if you give Milton a contract after this year for, let's say it's a 3-year deal.
Well, that's the thing.
Jordan's coming up, and then Jalen's coming up. It's like, that's a lot of money invested in the O-line, because I don't think Milton Williams is going to make. I think he's going to get a pretty good contract too, if not here, somewhere else.
Well, and that's what I'm talking about. If he bets on himself and has a big year, he's going to get a really big contract. And that's one of the reasons why I thought the Eagles would have tried to act early. And maybe they did. Like I said, maybe they said, nope, Fletcher's not here. I'm going to have the opportunity to really show and really earn some more money. So it could be 2 avenues. One, the Eagles don't think as much of them as I do. That could be one. The other could be he's betting on himself. So, but if he has a big year, yeah, that's going to hurt the Eagles. And that's why I thought they would act early.
Yeah, me too. We'll get to our next commercial timeout. Coming up next, Paul Domo, Hall of Fame selector, a guy that knows the Eagles as good as anybody, been covering them for a long time. So we'll get his takeaways on the OTAs. Paul Domo next on Birds 365.
If you missed any of today's show on the JAKIB Media channel, listen to the podcast on your way home. Available on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.
Field of life, First Trust Bank is there for you.
Champions on 3. 1, 2, 3.
Because Philadelphia dreams deserve a Philadelphia bank.
Heading down the shore. Have a ball once more.
Here, imaginations run wild and time stands still. Because here, you can find the best of the Jersey Shore, all on one 5-mile island. So leave the old you behind and get lost in the woods.
Wild, wild, wildwood day.
Plan your stay in the Wildwoods today.
Hi, I'm Jim Muehlbronner, Managing Partner at Del Valle Insurance Group. Give us a call. We're a local, knowledgeable agency, not an 800 number. Go Birds!
The greatest fans on earth. It's a bold statement, but would you expect anything less from Philadelphia? 58 years of heartache creates a toughness, a grit, a resolve not found in most. Sure, our prayers were answered, but now that we've had a taste, we're looking for more. Pondley Hockey, official partner of the Philadelphia Eagles.
EAGLES, Eagles.
Welcome back in, everybody. Friday's edition of Birds 365, joined now by Paul Domo, Hall of Fame selector, longtime reporter for the Philadelphia Eagles. Domo, how you doing this morning, man? Good to have you on.
Doing well, guys. Glad to be with you.
Good to see you, Domo. How excited are you for the first day of OTAs and hearing about it and the overreactions? Our buddy Ed Krause got one of the overreactions. Kenny Pickett was very sharp, and evidently it's taken off. And we all said, hey, you know what? Kenny looks pretty good. He's playing on the second team. There's a bunch of receivers who aren't there. Devontae wasn't there. And Jalen didn't look as sharp. Part of the reason was Devontae wasn't there. AJ's taken very few reps, and Joseph Nada's with the first team, which is not great. So for one day in May, Kenny Pickett looks sharp, and then evidently people are taking the baton and saying Kenny Pickett's pushing Jalen Hurts. It's insanity. But that's OTAs. You love them? You miss them?
No, not at all. Other than the fact that it's a lot cooler during OTAs than it is.
That was hot too. It was hot. It was like a training camp practice. It was like 87.
You look in Chicago, they've already, there's panic over Caleb Williams.
I saw that.
He struggles in his first OTA. I mean, people need to get a grip. There's no contact. It's mostly 7-on-7s. If that, just close your eyes and it'll be September soon.
Yeah.
We're itching for the football dopamine rush, Domo. If everybody makes something out of something. I said to John, the tale as old as time is the spring football backup quarterback.
Oh boy.
Kenny Pickett got a chance to get some of that after Ed Kratz wrote that he looked good in practice and somebody took it and run with it. Now Pittsburgh's writing about it. Clutch Points is writing about it. So happens all over the league.
Yeah. Yeah, you mentioned Caleb Williams. Yeah, I saw some of that. Evidently, J.J. McCarthy didn't look great. I saw some of that. Yeah, it shouldn't be a surprise when rookie quarterbacks. I do take it a little bit more seriously with rookie players, though, as a whole, because I think it's more important for them. And I saw some positive stuff from Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean, and I think that should be very exciting for Eagles fans. They look the part of NFL players, and sometimes when guys show up to these types of things, I remember Jason Kelsey during his retirement talking about showing up and watching Jason Peters and Trent Cole and saying, I don't know if I can do this. Those guys look like they belong. I think little things like that, you can get a feel for. Have you noticed that over the years?
Yeah. I mean, some guys come in and they're intimidated, and it's I think that's one of the reasons the Eagles have over the last few years have enjoyed drafting guys from Alabama and Georgia, was because these are guys who are used to big games and big situations, and the feeling is they'd make a easier adjustment to the pros. I mean, Mitchell's from Toledo, which is they've decided to go the opposite way this year, but I think both of these guys, especially at corner, I mean, you need to have confidence very quickly if you're going to make any kind of contribution in your first year. And I think, they need at least one of these guys. If you assume Bradberry is not going to be back, they need at least one of these guys to be, to make a positive contribution this year.
I want to get your takeaways on Britton Covey was returning punts. Obviously, he's a great punt returner, but Cooper DeJean was back there. Do you think that's a role that they would go with the guy in the second round pick? Is that too high to put Cooper DeJean? I don't like it just from that perspective. And Britton Covey was successful, but just your thoughts on like a guy of that caliber drafted that high playing a role like that. Is that something the team would try and avoid?
No, I don't think so. But, I doubt, after the year Covey had, he finished second in kick return in punt return average.
Yeah.
I don't think that's I think he's pretty secure. Unless he gets hurt, he'll be their return guy. What's going to be more interesting is how they approach the kick return situation, because teams differ on how, what you need, what kind of player you need under the new rules. I think that's, I don't, a lot of people are looking for the fast, the guy that can get up, get fast quick, because there's going to be a 30-yard, 20, 25-yard cushion there where you're not going to be touched. So, the quicker you can get to that point, the better. So maybe Ross ends up being a guy that think might fill.
Yeah. I don't think he's going to be on the 53, but I see your thought process there. Isaiah Rodgers, I think, is a guy you should look at as a potential kickoff returner. He did it at a pretty high level with the Colts. Very fast. Looked good. Which was a concern coming off the suspension. There's a little bit of rust, and he looked like he handled it pretty well. So I think he might be involved. But you're right. We tried to get something out of Michael Clay, but Michael, he's not going to give you much. And they all act like, oh, we got to wait and see. No, you got to plan. You got to try to get ahead of the curve and see how teams or how you think the new kickoff rules are going to unveil themselves and change the game, if they change the game. But you're right on Covey, Domo. Why do people want to replace that guy? He was unbelievable as a punt returner. He was the best punt returner in football. But he's 5'6". They say he's 5'8". He's not 5'8". He's 5'6". He's 150 pounds soaking wet. It's unbelievable. He's great. Why?
I know. I mean, the strides he made from 22 to 23, just amazing. I mean, it's like the light went on, and he figured out, how to avoid that first guy and get, the main thing I saw from him last year is he knew he had to get it upfield as quickly as possible. Get as many yards as you can. Everything else, if you can, even if it's 5, I mean, if that's all they're giving you, if that's all you can get. But he ended up, I think, averaging something like 14 yards a return, which was amazing. Yeah, I mean, this is a guy who should feel fairly secure that job's going to be his as long as he stays healthy. But you need backup plans for everything.
No, they have great backups. I mean, Cooper can do it. Anaya Smith can do it. He's not been healthy, so they have younger players that can do it. And I think that should. But the second part is, I do think they want Cooper on the field defensively. And if you want that and you're working towards that, you probably don't want to burden him with punt returns as well. Not that, again, I don't think it's relevant other than he's going to be the backup to Britton Covey. And I think the Eagles know what they have. And Nick certainly knows what he has with Britton. So I think that's more outside the building, people worrying about Britton's going to be the punt returner. But as far as Cooper and getting him on the field, it's probably not going to be an outside corner because you're going to have Slay and Mitchell. So it's got to be somewhere else. And it could be the slot, could be big nickel. But I think they're trying to get him on the field. And Vic Fangio showed that his first rep, Domo, was at slot corner, and then he was at outside corner. They're pretty deep. It's nice to have, after what went on last year, now you have Avonte Maddox, who cross-trained at safety as well as playing nickel. You have Cooper, who's playing different positions. And you have all the young quarterbacks, Isaiah Rodgers. And by the way, Ketley Ringo wasn't even there. So they're pretty deep at the cornerback position.
Yeah, and versatile. I mean, that's the fact that you can move these guys all around is going to cause problems for for opposing quarterbacks. They're not going to know what they're looking at. You're going to if you can go with a big nickel package with that's going to be helpful if you're not losing any speed. I like the versatility they got at corner right now.
Dom, I want to ask you about Vic Fangio. I know you go way back with Vic Fangio, even before he was an NFL guy. A lot of hate. I'm going to call it hate because I don't think it was criticism. It sounded like hate to me coming from some Dolphins players saying he was a bad guy. You saw some Eagles guys jump to his defense, namely Jalen Carter. Just what do you make of that story? And I think it's a nothing burger. I want my coach to be hard on me. I want him to push me to be better because I think that's how you take an athlete like Jalen Carter, who's obviously supremely talented, and you want to get the most out of him. I think you got to coach him hard. So I have no problem with Vic's old school style, but apparently people in Miami did. What do you make of it?
The guy's been in the league forever, and that's the first time I ever heard anybody complain about his coaching style and his relationship with players. My feeling is they just had a lot of prima donnas down there.
Yeah.
They were a pretty good defense until the injuries. So, I don't know if they were looking for a scapegoat. The players were looking for a scapegoat and didn't want to, Jalen Ramsey is a guy that's, a pain in the butt when it comes to that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I think that's one reason. He didn't seem to like Vic for whatever reason. So, I don't. There's going to be no.
I can tell you the reason, Domo. Jalen Ramsey, you're going to have that discussion in the years upcoming. He's a Hall of Fame player. I mean, he is a great cornerback. Nick Sirianni raves about Jalen Ramsey. He's one of those guys that his peers rave about and coaches. And he's a press cover guy. Those high level corners, they just want to press people. That's all they want to do. And Vic's got all these different zone coverages and he just doesn't like it. And, take it with a grain of salt when it's Jalen Ramsey. I'm with you. He's one of those guys. But as far as the other players, I do think there's something to this generation of player that maybe they're not as used to being pushed as hard. Any concern with that? Because they're coming up, and Vic mentioned it in his presser with us. He said he blamed it on the people around the players. He didn't blame it on the players. He said they want to work, but you got to be the adult in the room essentially and push them. And they've grown up, though, where everybody's talking about load management. You can't do this. You can't do that. Is that becoming a hurdle for old school coaches?
I don't think it will be with this team and Vic because they got a lot of young guys on defense. There aren't a lot of guys that you can see being prima donnas. Darius Slay's a veteran, but Darius Slay's not going to have the problems with Vic, who respects players that he had with
Matt Patricia.
Who's going to abuse them and disrespect them. And so I don't, at least for a year, I can't see this team having a problem with anything he asks them to do. He's made it clear, what he's going to do. I think he was asked twice in his press conference, how he feels about, dropping edge rushers like, even Bryce, Huff, like all the criticism they got last year when Reddick on a few occasions up. Fletcher Cox, I think, was criticizing him making comments publicly. He said, we're going to do it sometime.
Yeah. It's nice to hear somebody that's not so
live with that and they'll be playing with it. And
by the way, Domo, that's another one. I can't believe people don't understand. Like, I always use the baseball comparison. Nolan Ryan doesn't throw 100% baseballs. You got to throw a curveball occasionally.
Yeah.
It's not about matching up Hassan Reddick with a player in coverage. He's going to be a flat defender, a hook defender. You're trying to fool the quarterback with a curveball.
Yep.
Everybody loses their mind when they see an edge rusher drop in coverage. Everybody does it since Dom Capers. Blame Dom Capers. He was the one who created it. It's part of the game. I don't understand why people are so upset by that.
Yeah. And Vic's a Dom disciple. So,
Yeah.
I got to be honest. I'm going to go the other way with this in terms of I want more Vic Fangio types, maybe modern football mindset coaches, but I like the old school coach. And this is what I don't like about one of my knocks on Nick Sirianni would be, I don't love the dichotomy with him and Jalen Hurts. And what I mean by that is I think Jalen would do better with a more head coach like Vic, maybe a more old school guy that's going to push him, a guy that's going to be hard on him, tell him the things that are tough and force him to be a better quarterback. Like Jalen has mentioned, I want to be coached hard. Saban, guys like that are just Like, I think Jalen would do great with a coach like that. And I don't think Nick gives him that. And maybe we would benefit from more of that.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of people feel that's kind of what hurt Jalen last year. And that, when Brian Johnson became his offensive coordinator and had to be hard on Jalen, after the relationship they already had as both, first friends before he came to the Eagles and then as his quarterbacks coach. Sometimes it's tough to be the guy that, that puts his foot up the guy's butt when it needs to be put up there. So yeah, I agree with you, Zander. A lot of times, and I think Jalen will benefit this year from. I mean, Kellen Moore's a young guy, but it's not the same relationship he had with Brian Johnson. Kellen Moore's going to tell him what he needs to hear.
Yeah, hopefully. Yeah.
So, yeah.
By the way, I don't think Jalen Hurts is a burst to hard coaching at all. I mean,
no, I don't. That's my point. I think he would like it. I think he would prefer it.
Yeah, his dad obviously, he kind of grew up with the old school mentality, and Nick is also not afraid to drop some F-bombs. I do think there's maybe a little bit of a bad narrative when it comes to Nick. He's willing to call people out. I'm not sure about the Brian and their reputation and their relationship, because Brian's kind of a little bit more understated. But my concern with Jalen Hurts, Domo, and I want to run this by you. I think everybody's trying to turn this guy into, not the Eagles, but I think everybody outside the building's trying to turn him into Brock Purdy. You got to get rid of the ball. You got to get. That's not his game. Why are we bothering with that? I mean, to me, your job as a coach is to make the player you do have a little bit better than where he can go on his own. I don't want to turn him into a completely different quarterback. I don't think he's Brock Purdy. I don't think he's the guy where the back foot hits the ground and the ball's out. Nor do I think you want him to be that guy. Or should you want him to be that guy?
With this receiving core, I don't think you would want to. I mean, you're right. I don't think that's the kind of quarterback he is. I can't imagine Kellen Moore wants to turn him into that kind. I mean, they're going to make some changes. I mean, Jalen needs to, I mean, we've talked before, ad nauseum about his obsession last year with the deep ball and how that needs to change. And they need to throw to the backs more. And you're going to see that. They didn't bring in who they brought in with the attitude that they're not going to throw the ball to him. So, but yeah, they're not. I mean, he's not going to be a rhythm passer back there, a guy that puts his foot in the ground and gets rid of it. But I think a lot of people do get a little bit obsessive about. He's had one poor year.
I don't even think it was a poor year.
Yeah.
It was a burst.
It was the first time in a long time he took a step backwards.
Yeah.
And I think everybody's over embellishing it. Yeah.
But I don't think he had a bad year. I don't.
The 15 interceptions kind of stand out.
Right.
There are things he needs to improve at. I mean, he knows that. So I don't have any concerns that this isn't going to be a much better quarterback this year. So.
How do you like the fit with Kellen Moore for him, Domo?
I like it. I've always liked Kellen. I think they'll get along well. I think he knows how to. He's a guy that's not. I think the benefit of being a 35-year-old guy, as opposed to we've and Vic's not like this. Vic's made a point that he works defensively. He works his offense around what he's got. Well, Kellen's going to do the same thing with his offense. I mean,
right. You're not stuck in your ways. You're young and you're still.
He's going to accentuate the things Jalen does well. And I think it's going to be a good fit. I think, as long as that offensive line plays well, as long as they don't have any problems at right guard, as long as Juergens makes the transition to center, they'll be fine.
Yeah, my biggest concern would be what Johnny Mack mentioned, where I want to get a coordinator, and I hope Kellen can be this, that looks at Jalen Hurts for what he is and says, how can I make this the best version of this instead of how can I turn him into Dak Prescott or Brock Purdy, as John mentioned.
Yeah. I mean, he had some pretty good years with Dak. I mean, Dak, and Dak's got a lot, back then. I mean, Dak is a mobile quarterback, I mean, but I mean, that one year he threw with Kellen Moore as offensive coordinator. What did he throw? Like 35 touchdown passes. So I think this is going to be a good fit. I made it clear that I was really shocked that it didn't work between him and Brian Johnson. I think there was more involved there than just putting it all on Johnson's plate. But I think everybody, including Nick, has learned from the mistakes of last year, and they know what they need to do going forward as far as how this offense is going to work, operate, and be successful.
Yeah, I mean, and it's a very talented team, especially offensively. But I got to tell you, Domo, this week has kind of highlighted to me, if you start thinking about, and we know the NFL, I mean, they don't play a lot. So it's paralysis by analysis. That's why this show exists. We talk about everything. But I start to think about how can this go wrong? And my first thought is always the quarterback. Obviously, if the quarterback gets hurt, that's the quickest way. But putting that aside, boy, if they lose AJ or Devontae, this is a completely changed offense. I mean, you can't replace players like that. It's not like you can have another one as a backup at that level. But boy, right now it falls off a cliff when you talk about their outside receivers down to the second grouping, to the point they're trying to start the reclamation process on John Ross. And I didn't even have Devontae Parker making this team, but when he retired and I started looking at, it's Joseph Nada and Jacob Harris and Shaq Davis, and I could make up a bunch of names and it'd be the same thing. I mean, there is nothing as far as proven players or even projection behind AJ Brown, Devontae Smith. Does that concern you at all?
Well, sure. I mean, you got the two best, probably the best receiving tandem in the league, and if they didn't have that, it's going to be a big blow. But I mean, I think that's why an offense has to be versatile. I mean, you look at Kansas City. I mean, 3 years ago, after they let Tyreek Hill go, I mean, Mahomes had nobody to throw to. And they still managed to be successful. Isaiah Pacheco became a factor. They had Kelsey. Same thing. I mean, you've got to be able to. You lose somebody like that, you got to be able to figure out. You got to have a plan B ready. You've got to suddenly Dallas Goedert's a go-to guy. You've got Saquon Barkley now. You use him as a receiver. If you lost an AJ Brown, you don't just. I mean. They have to be ready for that. That's what off seasons are for. I don't think, last year there were times when teams would take things away and it was like they looked dumbfounded. That's got to change this year. I think it will.
Well, that's my worry when you bring up Patrick Mahomes. It's like, it's Patrick Mahomes. Like I don't know if we should expect Jalen and it's maybe unfair to him and the offense for them to be able to make those adjustments. Like Patrick Mahomes won the Super Bowl last year with Marquez Valdez-Scantling. If he was wide receiver 1 in Philadelphia, we'd be. I mean, we're worried about wide receiver 4, and we have AJ Brown and Devontae. Like I just. But
Damo's right, Zander, in the fact that Kansas City, people forget Patrick Mahomes struggled a little bit when Tyreek Hill first left, and he had fallen in love with the big play a little bit. And all of a sudden, even when Tyreek was still there, people started playing all cover 2 against the Chiefs and putting the safeties in the parking lot. And he was struggling with that a little bit. And then he loses them. But they are overcome it. Even last year, mid-season.
Took them a little bit, but man, they won the games that counted down the stretch.
And they sort of adjust along the way. That's what the Eagles couldn't do. They adjust along the way.
Yeah.
And the Eagles just, all right, you stopped us and we didn't have the adjustment. So but that's Andy Reid, who is
Yeah, that's Andy and Patrick. That's a perfect recipe over in Kansas City. I'm maybe a little bit jealous of it.
And now they've got Xavier Worthy, who runs a 4.21 40, and you hope he's not John Ross.
I was about to say
and Hollywood Brown. I mean, so they're back to, Mahomes is already talking about, the deep ball and how they're going to be, big plays. And so teams are going to have to go, defenses are going to have to go back to putting people in the parking lot to defend them.
Yeah. I will say, I think there's an upside to it from the perspective of even a quarterback like Patrick Mahomes, who's by far the best QB in the league. Like that forced him to get better. Like he got better last year because he was forced to throw to Marquez and Rashee Rice and all those guys. And, you don't have a guy like Tyreek Hill that you can rely on. I think it would help Jalen, but I don't want to see it happen. Yeah. I'd rather have A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith out there.
The bottom line with that offense, and it's one reason I think Dallas Goedert needs to become a bigger part this year, is, I mean, if they didn't have Travis Kelce, a lot of the things we're talking about would be really big factors that probably would have prevented Kansas City from having, winning 2 of the last 3 Super Bowls. So, I mean, I really think, Goddard's kind of become a 55 catch a year guy. But 2 years ago,
keep waiting for that breakout. But I don't know if we're going to get it because AJ and Devontae are there. Yeah.
If you don't,
is he overrated, Dallas Goedert, to you guys?
I don't think so.
No.
I think he's one of the best tight ends of football. Now he gets hurt.
So maybe so he's underutilized at this point.
I don't even know he's underutilized.
I mean, if you're one of the best tight ends in football and you have 55 catches, then you're not playing like one of the best tight ends in football, or at least producing like one.
I mean, the thing about him is you look at the catches, but there's more to him than the catches. I mean, he's one of the best two or three blocking tight ends in the league. But you look at his numbers sometimes, he doesn't catch many balls on third down. And yet the Eagles are what they finished. I think they finished first in third down percentage last year.
I think they were third and third down, first and fourth down. Yeah.
Because of the other people they've got. They haven't needed to go to him. But I just think he needs to be a factor on third down in the red zone more so than he's been.
I think Kellen's going to be good at that. I think Kellen will be able to work some of those more, like get the ball around a little bit more and maybe create more of those opportunities for Jalen to have the easy throw every once in a while.
Like Dak did with Schultz in Dallas.
Yeah, it's hard to project that. There's the big three, Travis and George Kittle and Mark Andrews. I think if Dallas was in a different situation, I don't know if he'd be those guys, but if you put him in Baltimore, for instance, Lamar's always loved throwing to tight ends. He'd have 70. That 55 would turn into 70, 75 pretty quickly.
Yeah, real quick.
And then maybe there's a different sort of mindset with him. But I think he's a great player. The most impressive thing about OTAs, Domo, while they were doing special team stuff, Jason Michael was just throwing fastballs at Dallas Goedert, just messing around right in front of us on the sideline. Every one of them, one-handed, snatched out of the air, so effortlessly. He is unbelievably talented. And I think it's the opposite because he doesn't get the traffic that other tight ends get, that he's a little bit underrated.
Yeah.
But he does play. That's what I said. And he won that. Kyle Brandt has that goofy Angry Run Award. I don't know if you've ever seen it on TV, where it's just the most physical runs. Yeah. And Dallas won it twice. He plays a little bit too physically. Him and Devontae, his buddy, his old roommate, same thing. He's a big guy, though. Avonte's undersized. I've always said Avonte plays too physically, and Dallas gets hurt. He broke his forearm because he was stiff-arming the guy and
trucking
trucking him down the field. That's how he got hurt.
Yeah. But you you mentioned the traffic that some of these other guys see, that Kelsey and Andrews and Kittle. I mean, that's been one. I mean, 2 years ago, Goddard. I mean, his catch number wasn't prolific, but I think he was first or second among tight ends in yards after.
Yeah, yards. Yeah.
So he needs to get back to that, because I mean, when you've got Devontae and AJ Brown, I mean, people are going to, that's where the traffic's going to be. That's where
there's only one football, and then you added. This is where I agree with John on Saquon. It's like now you added Saquon. There's only one football. Like I don't think it's possible Dallas Goedert has increasing catches this year. He could be the best tight end in football. He might still not get the ball.
They always say, Nick always says, good problem to have. He's not the first one, but in the term good problem, it is still problem. It can be a problem to keep everybody happy when you have that many good players. But
absolutely.
At P Domo, make sure you follow Paul on X.com. Does a tremendous job there. Saw you wrote something for our buddy Al Thompson over at footballstories.com. You should check that out. 33rd foot team as well. Good to see you, Domo. Happy Memorial Day weekend in advance. Hope you enjoyed that.
Me too. You guys too.
Thanks, Domo.
You bet. Take care.
Domo, thanks, man. See you. There's Paul Domo. It's joining us on Birds 365. John, I want to take a break because we'll wrap up the week here. Friday edition. Good Friday show today, by the way. Martin Frank had good intel from OTAs. I thought that was a great conversation there with Paul Domo, which always brings good stuff. Obviously, a highly knowledgeable guy, a Hall of Fame selector. And a little bit of Kenny Pickett fun in the open. So pretty good stuff there. But I just to stay on Dallas Goedert for a second while we close out this last couple minutes of Birds 365 for the week. This is where I agree. If you utilize Goddard better, don't you think it'll open it up for AJ and Devontae? Thanks, Amber Baker in the chat. We appreciate you for being here.
I always go back to Doug.
This is kind of similar to the debate we had on Saquon. Like, you're not going to go to him because you have AJ and Devontae. You're going to go to your stars. But is there like a little bit of leeway there where it's like, hey, if he's more involved, might make life easier for AJ and Devontae?
For those that don't know, Nick Sirianni's college coach, Larry Krause, he has tremendous respect for, and he always tells a story when he went back to Mount Union to interview for a coaching job, and Larry Krause was, interviewing him and saying, what's he going to do with the offense and things like that. And Nick had all these plans, and he's going through it, and he stopped him and he said, you don't even know who the players are. And what he was trying to get across is, you better build around your talent. And the second part of that is, he told him, where are your in a later conversation, when you have your play sheet, where are your plays for so and so? In the case of the Eagles, that's AJ and Devontae.
Right.
You got to have a group of plays to make sure you're getting them the football at all times. And then I go back to Doug Peterson. When Doug got a lot of heat there was a stretch of games where Matt Collins was starting, and I think he went 3 games, something like that, when not out catching a pass. And you're like, how can a starting receiver in the NFL not catch a pass? Well, Matt Collins at the time was not a good player, developed a little bit later in his career, and has stuck around.
Yeah, it's actually pretty crazy. He's still hanging around, Matt Collins.
Still hanging around.
Yeah.
So, but at the time, Doug got frustrated, and people are saying he's like, one of the funniest things he ever said to me. He's like the 6th freaking option. If I'm drawing up plays for Matt Collins, you should fire me tomorrow. You should be killing me. I think people don't understand. When you have AJ Brown, it's AJ Brown. When you have Devontae Smith, it's Devontae Smith. That's not to say You don't throw a curveball, just like Bick on defense. But understand it's
don't
a
you think
curveball. It's
don't
a
you think?
curveball. Sorry. Go ahead.
No, you're good. I cut you, but don't you think? I mean, look, don't you think this extends when you have players like you just called Dallas Goedert one of the best tight ends in football? One of. We have Saquon Barkley. Like, don't you think this isn't Matt Collins I'm talking about? Like, we are talking about high caliber football
Yeah, well,
players.
he was the
And
sixth
AJ
option.
Brown and Devontae combined for what, 2,400 yards or 2,500 yards last year? Maybe more than that, maybe 2,700 yards. Like, okay, maybe this year they combined for 2,300, but you make up that production because you spread the ball around a little bit more to good players, Dallas Goedert and Saquon.
Look, when Nick first got here, it was 6 and 88. As all football coaches talk in numbers.
Yep. Smitty
and then it became 11. And ironically, at first it was 11 and 88 because he wanted to mix it up, and then it became 11 and 6 and 88. It's always those three. It's always AJ first, and it should be. And I don't care how many. If people don't understand
I do
man,
agree with you in that perspective. Like you got AJ Brown. Like you have to use him, but yeah, I don't know. The one thing I struggle with is that I don't think it would hurt to add some variety. I get what you're saying. If I'm throwing plays up for the fifth guy, fire me tomorrow. I get it. But man, we couldn't do anything down the stretch last year. Maybe it helps if you have more options that are worked into the game, and it opens things up for even the two guys, AJ and Devontae.
I don't know. I use the NBA thing. And it's like, if you're struggling, and everybody struggles from
go back to your stars.
Yeah, LeBron James on down. You don't go away from LeBron James in his prime. Oh, we're struggling. Let's go away from LeBron. And I don't want to, it's one of the greatest players of all time. AJ's top 5 receiver.
I think he's top 3.
If you're struggling, you don't go away from your best players. You double down on your best players. And sometimes it doesn't work, but that doesn't mean
you go away from it.
Yeah. I mean, that just at a base visceral level, that just makes no sense. That we're struggling. Let's go away from AJ Brown.
I'm struggling to AJ Brown. Let me throw it to the ball. Let me get 3 plays of 5 yards to Saquon Barkley. Now the defense is closing down on Saquon. Boom. Now AJ's open again downfield. Like, you see what I'm saying? You at least see what I'm saying, right?
No, and that's, again, when you draw up a play for AJ Brown, or you draw up a play where they're for Devontae, where they're the number one option, that doesn't mean there aren't other layered aspects to that particular play. Sometimes he's double teamed, Seattle with AJ, and then you're supposed to go in other directions, and that's where guys like Saquon Barkley, or all the way down to Kenny Gainwell, are supposed to get involved. And occasionally, as they did in practice, you draw up a wheel route for Saquon Barkley as the curveball. And maybe it works and everybody gets excited. But if that's the meat of your offense, when you have AJ Brown, you're a bad football coach. Sorry.
Yeah, I agree with that. There's no debate for me on that. Reminder to everybody in the chat, we went a little long here. So this 5 extra minutes is your Monday edition. We have no Monday show. So this is your 5 extra minutes from Monday's edition of Birds 365. Happy Memorial Day weekend to you, Johnny Mack, and to everybody in the chat. I hope you guys have some meaningful time with anybody that's important in your life, your family, your friends, your loved ones. Make sure you thank a veteran and thank somebody that served in our armed forces for their contributions to our country. Memorial Day is, I like to say, I celebrate the military, but it's also a sad day in a way. Is that you're memorializing all the people that have gave their ultimate sacrifice for our country. So we appreciate any veterans in the chat, anybody that has a loved one that served in the military that may have passed in the military. Obviously, a tough thing to deal with, but we're going to take the day off for Memorial Day. I hope everybody has a fantastic weekend. Thank you guys for being in the chat. Make sure you drop us a like in the show. Johnny Mack, good week of shows, man. We'll catch you on Tuesday. Eagles are back out there on Tuesday, right, for OTAs?
Yeah, they'll be back out there Tuesday. We will not be back out there with them until Thursday, most likely. Tentative, but
so you guys will have at least one more session.
Yeah, we'll have one more OTA session. Then we'll be in there all 3 days of mandatory minicamp in early June.
Coming right up, Johnny Mac. May 24th, my brother's birthday today. So pretty good stuff. Happy birthday to my brother. Johnny Mac, thanks for the good week of shows. We'll catch you on Tuesday, man.
All right. Thanks, guys. Enjoy the weekend.
Thank you, everybody in the chat. We appreciate it. Hit that like on your way out. We will catch you on Tuesday for Birds 365.
You've been listening to Birds 365, the destination for the passionate Eagles football fan who bleeds green. If it's Eagles football, we're talking about it. Debate inside the locker room and guests that are some of the greatest football minds from around the region. We hope you enjoyed the show. We know we had a blast. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hook up with us on social media at JAKIB Sports. See you next time on Birds 365.